Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. What is the actual value of true crime in terms of our larger lives, in terms of our experience? And so one of the things we ought to take, that we hopefully take out of our interest in true crime, is critical thinking. And what critical thinking involves is basically asking a lot of questions. And that's not enough. It's not just to ask questions, but also pursue the answers. Sometimes also when you get the answers, you sometimes need to reapply critical thinking to those answers. Keep asking questions until you get a degree of certainty about what the reality actually is. In other words, you're testing, retesting your perception until you kind of get so much information that it starts to crystallize and you get a really good idea. It starts to sort of pixelate into this really clear impression of what is the reality of that situation. So when I talk to you guys about this mountain bike crash that I had, some of you might think, wow, this is really self-indulgent. Others might think it's really irrelevant. But it is actually an exercise, obviously, through me, through this unfortunate experience, but it's an exercise in seeing how you get to the reality of something that applies directly to you, and why it's important to do that. So, you also might say it's no mystery. You were stupid, you fell, you got injured, get over it, and that's true to some extent, but look at what happens when you do some investigation. I actually wasn't going to go for an x-ray. I thought I was okay. My lungs are certainly okay. And then I did go for an x-ray. And then the x-rays were inconclusive. And just today, the doctor sent me an SMS with an image from the x-ray. And it's quite disturbing. It's quite disturbing seeing what is actually going on there. So even the doctor, whose job it is, if you take the old true crime thing into the medical field, his job is to investigate the nature of medical injuries, what exactly is going on there. And I think when they x-rayed me like 9 times, something like that. I even said to the woman, isn't this getting a bit like radioactive, shouldn't you limit the amount of, and she said, where you've been injured is just very difficult to see. And that ultimately turned out to be the case. You would look at one x-ray, not be able to see anything, look at another one, not see anything clearly, look at another one. So yeah, you're actually looking inside the human body, but you can't actually see anything. And so what should you do? Should you shrug your shoulders, or should you keep looking, keep studying? And that same psychology applies in general to the situations we find ourselves in, especially when it's something significant, when something serious happens. So before we get to the rest of this episode, I'm going to take you through what has come through from a closer look at these x-rays. It turns out to be a lot more serious than first thought. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So I do describe this channel as the most authentic voice. I think part of it is owning your own, should one say SHIT, but owning your errors. And, in this case, it was a dumb fall, but what actually happened? And I own the dumbness of it. I mean, I'm very unhappy to be in this situation of having lost all the momentum from training. It was the end of a lovely 3 days, and all that remained was to just go downhill to the finish and drink a toast kind of thing. And then I obviously put myself in the situation, and it's so unfortunate, and it's so humbling. But now certainly there is time to reflect on what actually happened. So as I say, the doctor was kind enough to SMS me a relative close-up of the fracture a few hours ago. And so my first reading of it, he just sent the image with no context. He didn't say anything. He just sent me the image. I did ask him to show me exactly where the injury was. And so that is what he did. He basically just indicated with his pen, where the damaged rib is. So if I'm looking at the image correctly, it looks like half of the rib is lying sort of below the other half. And I sort of wonder, am I seeing this right? And I wouldn't describe that as a crack or a fracture. I wouldn't say, looking at that is the definition of a cracked or fractured rib. And so the X-ray is also from a side view, basically orientated, looking in from the shoulder perspective. It's not a frontal view. I think it's becoming clearer that my left arm and elbow acted as a sort of primary shock absorber, almost like the tire of a wheel, which then transferred the impact vertically through the superstructure of the rib cage. Most of the ribs absorbed this jolt like spokes in a wheel, with one exception. Now, the other thing that I want to sort of stress and emphasize to you guys is the importance of, it's sort of a combination of intuition and imagination. So when you're dealing with true crime, there are pieces of the puzzle that are missing, but there are also important pieces of the puzzle that you do have. And in order to fill in those missing pieces, you've got to some extent, intuit the reality. You've got to join the dots, right? And they've got to align. You don't have dots from one side just somehow magically intersecting. They've got to intersect in a way that is natural and normal, right? And you also need to imagine it in a way where how you imagine it is realistic, and it seems to be not only anchored in reality, but it seems to be credible. It's a credible reimagining. It's a credible reenacting. It's something that joins the actual metadata with one another in terms of your scenario, right? And so this is kind of an example of that, but beyond true crime, where you're saying, instead of someone being shot or some incident taking place, you are actually saying, well, I know what happened to me. I know that it's, in this case, it's a bicycle crash. So I know I know that an incident happened. The question is, how did it happen? That's also an integral part of true crime, and then also, to some extent, the motive. What were the intentions around it? What led to this happening? What actually made what happened inevitable? So I've got to assume that I actually fell less on my chest than on my left side. The first video I put up, I said I fell chest first. I think if that was the case, I would have punctured my lung. I would have had multiple broken ribs. I really don't think, I would have had to have been Superman to land chest first with the limited amount of injuries. So I think it is becoming clearer that I fell actually on my left side, and that my left arm worked as a sort of shock absorber. There are no scratches or bruises anywhere near my wrists, forearms, or hands. And that tends to be the area you normally fall on when you know you're falling. So when you're falling off a bicycle and you're aware of it, you tend to put out your hands, and that immediately puts your wrists, your hands, your fingertips, your forearms in harm's way. And I don't have any scratches there. And I think that confirms that I bounced initially off the bottom part of my elbow, right? If you think about the soles of your feet, the sort of sole part of your elbow, that was the part that first made contact. I think I was sort of in a rolling motion already. I bounced off that part, and then my whole body sort of rotated slightly as I began to surf on my side. By now, my left arm is under my chest, but more under my left side. Bent probably at this point 90 degrees, with my hand probably, my wrist and my hand somewhere near my throat, but totally out of harm's way. But in this position, it was sort of acting as a surfboard. My elbow was acting as a surfboard. Remember, the left arm was still outstretched. holding the left handlebar grip when I fell. And so you've got to take it from that position. So I suppose it's possible that part of the handlebar wedged between my arm and side may have just sort of slipped through there, or between the ground and my side. I find this doubtful because, once again, there's absolutely no bruising, and one would think if I fell that hard against any reasonably sized object, a stone, brake handle, pedal, side of the wheel, anything like that, it would have left a painful contusion, and there aren't any. There are abrasions where I slid over the gravel, but there's no blunt force trauma in that sense. I still have no idea where my bicycle went when I fell. It just seemed to slide under me and disappear. My feet were, bear in mind, my feet were locked into both pedals, and yet I seemed to disconnect from the bicycle and float forward without any impact to the frame or any of the projections on a bicycle or the gearing mechanisms. I don't know what happened to the bicycle. The people in the vehicle behind me may have seen something. I don't know whether it did somersaults behind me, if it slid away, if it slid to the right. I don't really know. That would also be quite an interesting thing, is where was the bike relative to me when I got up off the ground? I can't really say. I know it was to my right. I know the bicycle was to my right. And you can also see where the vehicle is parked and the bicycle leaned against it. For me, the mechanics of the fall itself, not the how of it, but the what of it, remains something of a mystery, as does the exact seriousness of the injury. Yesterday, I once again pulled myself gently off the ground on a pull-up bar in a vertical movement. I did 2 quarter pull-ups, maybe it was even less than that. Maybe it was like an eighth of a pull-up, but just very slight pull-ups where I lifted myself off the ground with my arms above me, and I did so with no pain. Can you believe it? I also swam 750 meters in a pool with no pain, maybe a little bit of pain, but mostly just slight discomfort. It sort of feels like I can't breathe completely. There's a bit of pressure around my lungs, not pain, but just feels like there's a little bit of pressure around it, which I guess is from inflammation. So I suppose there's still internal inflammation, which makes breathing shallower and more labored than usual. So I don't really want to be very out of breath. That probably would possibly become painful. My lungs overall seem fine. I haven't had any further incidents of hard coughing causing pain. I can cough shallowly. I can breathe deeply, like when I do it on purpose. I don't know if I was like really out of breath, what that would feel like. I can laugh in also sort of a shallow way, and even hiccup without pain. Hard coughing does hurt, and I try not to do that. I'm surprised that swimming doesn't hurt, but I suppose it shows I don't do much lateral movement when I swim, and you're not supposed to. Otherwise, I'd have felt the rib. I've also not attempted a tumble turn, which requires a lot of flexing and twisting of the abdominal region, and the sort of thorax. That part is definitely going to sort of swivel, and I can feel that's not going to happen for some weeks still. The how of the fall seems to be becoming clearer. I think the number one reason for the fall was the loose bottle cage. Okay, and so at this point in writing the script, I actually received a call from the doctor. He phoned me from his cell phone, and I think he was actually supposed to call me yesterday, but he confirmed that it's actually more than a cracked rib. He says it's broken and displaced. It's displaced by around 2 to 4 millimeters, and if you think about the actual width of the rib is barely much wider than that. It may be, 10 millimeters? I'm not sure, maybe a little bit more. But the rib is actually completely broken and it's displaced. The amazing thing is he says there's still no intervention necessary, no need for surgery. I thought he was going to say that. I thought he was going to say, I'm going to need to book you in for surgery, and he didn't. He said, obviously one can't put plaster of Paris around it. I found that quite funny. The the rib, he said, is the damaged rib, he said, is the fifth rib, which is nearer to the top of the chest, and the injury and displacement is actually more to the back. So if you think about your ribs, they're actually, if you think of them originating at your sternum, your breastbone, they then curve. They don't just curve to where you sort of feel your ribs around your side. They go all the way around to the back, around about to the spine, right? So it's almost a completely curved structure, some of the ribs at any rate. So, I think this confirms, anyway, him saying that the injury is actually more to the back of the chest than the front. This confirms to me that I did fall more on my side. Otherwise, the cracked rib would be in the front. The other thing is, it's painful for me lying on my back. It's definitely quite painful lying on my back, and I thought that was quite strange. If you've fallen on your chest, why is it painful lying on your back? This also confirms, as I say, that the impact was more falling to the side on my arm than chest first. And I think because I came to a rest on my chest, and the first thing I saw was gravel flying in front of my face, there was a perception that I fell on my chest. That and the fact that my chest hurts, not superficially but inwardly, all reinforced that perception. But here's the thing. Perception is not reality. And that is why one's got to, with a thing like this, especially medical aspects, you really want to know absolutely, you really want to be absolutely clear what is going on, right? I mean, your life literally, when I say life, I mean the wellness, your health, your happiness literally depends on to what extent you are aligning your health with reality. So anyway, I told the doctor that I've swum. So it's a little bit like talking to the police and admitting that you've done something that you probably shouldn't have done. So I told him that I've swum twice already. I told him that I did so without pain, and he asked me that I no longer do that. The reason, he said, is the rib has to realign naturally, and too much chest and arm movement could interfere with that process. The other thing is ordinary breathing is going to help the rib to find its place back to where it needs to be. Ordinary breathing. He did say that I can do swim kicks. I did ask him, I don't want to not train at all for 6 weeks. What can I do? I asked him if I could get in the pool and just, kick with my legs, not use my arms. He said I can do that. He said I can take walks. He said I can ride a stationary bike. He also said, please do not get on your bicycle again. So I can do all that while the realignment process runs its course. So it's quite an amazing, magical thing that in terms of the rib, the body basically says, okay, look, you effed up here. I'm going to sort this out, but just give me some time. Just back off, and doctors, you stay away. You stop training. The only person who can fix this is me, but it's not you. It's the instinctual me. So let me do my job, and you don't get in the way of that. So anyway, it's good to get clarity on exactly what's going on, and also to get certainty that it is actually quite a serious injury. I've definitely been in two minds about that. Immediately after I fell very, very hard. I could tell I fell hard. But when I got up, I thought, wow, I'm okay. And then when I reached for my bicycle, I was like, ouch, that hurt in terms of my left arm. And I was still, for quite a long time now, I've not been sure how serious this is. And so now I've got a lot more clarity. It is a broken rib. It's the first bone I've ever broken. It's not to be trifled with, A cracked rib, I think, if it was still aligned, would be something you could work with to some extent. But this is definitely more serious. So no more arm swimming for me in April, and I don't know if I'm going to be doing any more pull-ups either, just to be safe. So now let's return to the fall itself. That was what I was talking about when the doctor called while I was writing the script. So as I mentioned earlier, the how of the fall seems to be becoming clearer. Now, if I really wanted to, and I did speak to, there were some guys in a vehicle driving behind me, immediately, directly behind me when I fell. They saw me fall, and they actually were phoning through to the organizer, initially me saying, okay, I'm actually going to carry on, I'm going to ride on slowly, and then, in other words, they were giving him a blow-by-blow of what I was saying, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, my condition. And eventually the organizer did come up to me, and anyway, I decided I wasn't going to ride on, which I think was also the right decision. I also kind of felt quite weird about that. I thought, sure, why couldn't I have just ridden the last 11 kilometers? Could I not have handled that? And now seeing that the rib was actually broken, that definitely was the right decision. So I think the number one reason for the fall was the loose water bottle cage. If the water bottle cage wasn't loose, I don't think I would have fallen. I don't think it would have happened. So that's the number one reason. I think the second reason that's a major factor is the speed that I was going. So due to the speed, I wouldn't have wanted to look down at the bottle cage. In other words, look away from the road as I inserted it. Or if I did, I would likely have done so very quickly. So you kind of have something that is happening at cross purposes. On the one hand, I'm looking minimally at the bottle cage, which is causing me to spend more time finding the bottle cage and inserting the bottle, which is compromising me, right? But the reason I'm not looking is so that I can look at the road, right? And the reason I'm looking at the road is because of the speed that I'm going, right? But I kind of do need to look down at the bottle cage to see how far I'm overextending myself, which means I'm not looking at the road. And so if you had to play the whole thing over again, what do you think would be the solution? I think the solution, I've thought about it, the solution is I could have gone, because there was another bottle in another bottle cage, I could have gone for that bottle. Or I could have just thrown the bottle away. I'd already taken the sip. I didn't have to put it back. If I'd known those guys were riding behind me and I was, if I could tell the future, I could have just handed my bottle to them instead of putting it back in. So anyway, it's easy to say in hindsight. But it was necessary to do whatever I was going to do very quickly, put the bottle in the cage quickly, and if I was going to look down at it, look quickly as well. If I was going slower, that wouldn't have been an issue. I could have taken my time putting it back. I could have also spent a little bit more time looking at what I was doing. So it's hard to be certain if I did this, what I'm about to say now, or imagine doing this afterwards, but my impression was that I may have glanced down quickly, then looked up, and then try to feel if the bottle was going in. And as I'm sort of feeling, am I feeling resistance from the cage? Am I feeling that it's where it needs to be? While that was going on, that was how I got into trouble. And so to explain it, you can do this experiment yourself. Hold your left hand up, stretch out your arm parallel to the ground as if you're holding a baton or the handle of an empty bucket of water. And now with the other hand, your right hand, swing it across the front of your body. Not just your hand, swing sort of your arm and your hand across the front of your body. And each time, swing it a little further. Now, notice what happens to the left hand. The left hand tends to swing to the right every time you swing with your right hand under it. It may be just that as the wheel went slightly to the right, I made a final effort to push the water bottle left, pushing towards the left from the right-hand side into the cage, knowing and allowing for the cage to swing further left, but eventually reach its limit. And it was at this moment that my left hand, already numb, lost control of the handlebar, either as it pulled away from my fingertips. The handlebar may have actually pulled away from my fingertips as it sort of dug into the gravel, or just the simple dynamics of the one arm over-rotating under the other, causing the left shoulder and arm to push the handlebar forward. That could have also happened. And it could have been both. It could have started off as pushing the handlebar outward, and then it is gripped by the gravel, which then pulls it away from my fingers. And I do know that just a few minutes before that, I wasn't holding the handlebars very tightly. And it was hard to tell if I was, because my fingertips were quite numb. So either way, whatever happened, it was human error. And although I've blamed it on a lack of concentration, I think the villain of the story was the loose water bottle cage. If all things had been completely the same and the water bottle cage was not loose, so in other words, if I was as tired as I was, if I was going as fast as I was, if the road surface was exactly the way it was, everything was exactly the same, but the water bottle cage was secure, which I could have done and I should have done at a refreshment point just something like 10 minutes earlier. And we spent quite a long time there. You know, there were other people there treated for falls, and instead of being vigilant and acting proactively and with care, and I knew my water bottle was loose. I just was lazy. I just didn't fix it. I just thought, well, it's not very far to the end. And so, you know, had the water bottle not been loose, I don't think I would have fallen. But since I was aware it was loose and I persisted regardless, I paid a price for my own recklessness. And in that sense, there was a lack of proper concentration, not necessarily associated with the fall, but preceding it, but probably associated with the fall as well. Does that make sense? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.